Welcome back to the Tactical Scrubs podcast. Now, before I introduce Mel Cortez and a very special guest today, I want to tell a story about one of the turning points in how I think of recruitment that this person played a key role in. Interestingly, before we ever worked in the same organization.
I was scared. I thought it was going to be a story about me from England, and I was like, I'm not prepared for this.
We have that podcast ready to load, Mel. We recorded that
scared,
before we let you out. Yeah. So the story goes something like this, and I want us to imagine the world of healthcare recruitment. And the story goes that there are two people in the jungle, and they're walking along a trail, and all of a sudden a tiger jumps out of the bush. And the tiger looks hungry and starts giving chase. The two people start running. Anyway, they get about 100 meters down and one of them stops, takes off his backpack and pulls out a pair of running shoes. And the other person keeps running, turns around over his shoulder and says, "You're crazy. You're never going to outrun a tiger." And the other person says, "I don't need to outrun a tiger. I just need to be quicker than you." And that's how healthcare recruitment probably, I think, is today. And this is a true story. Rowan Marriot, Chief Executive of AudienceLink and many other ventures, is with us today. But Rowan, that's from our time together when you were at a different organization, as was I.
I mean, I could believe Rowan outran you, and also that the tiger probably had sufficient food since you're 6'4". So Rowan just made it out of the jungle fine.
Well, Rowan wasn't. This was sound advice for recruitment. This was the type of story. This is when I first realizing, albeit as a very junior nurse, that Rowan was the best and that he understood healthcare recruitment in a way that few people were talking about, thinking about. And the reason why Rowan's the best isn't just that he has a great eye for the detail and he truly cares and understands why healthcare is so important. It's that he's able to take things that are really complicated and complex and just relate it to real people. And healthcare is the ultimate person-related business. So that story to me just symbolizes how you can have two NHS trusts, same budgets, same people, same job roles. One will have a vacancy rate of less than 15%, and one will have one over 25%, because all of the things are quite equal. And it's just about how can you perform your competitor. Rowan, thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank God there's no tigers.
I know. The funny thing is, that was, 7 or 8 years ago. And so that was at a time where, everybody in healthcare they were after the same talent. So they're going after experienced care and support workers, or CNAs, as they say. I learned the other day in the US.
Yeah, very good.
The neighbours kind of nurses. And dare I say it, they were even after going after nurses in their own organisation because there was so much pressure on filling vacancies so that beds weren't blocked. And so there was loads and loads of money pumped into, competing against other companies in the sector with very little time spent or strategy in bringing people into the sector. 7 or 8 years ago, I think it has progressed a little bit, but, depending on how many companies you speak to, that story remains the same, which is frightening because every year, every conversation is about a staffing crisis in healthcare globally, definitely in the UK. And, there are solutions out there, but more often than not, they are the wrong ones.
I think that's a key portion of it too, is they talk about a staffing crisis when we know that there's tons of registered nurses. And I can speak for the US market, right? We know that 40% of new graduate nurses are leaving in the first 2 years of the profession. So we've got these trained nurses. And I think that's the portion of AudienceLink. And I love the name. I think, Rowan, one of the things that you're really skilled at is taking the employee brand and the value proposition that employer has. And each organization, like Dean said, is completely different. You might have a hospital that's owned by the same parent company, but those two locations are completely different. And I think having someone like Rowan and the company AudienceLink, they really do. They take that, they know their audience, they understand the audience, and then they link that to the most appropriate staff for that environment. And I think when we look at the staffing crisis, we do have nurses. They just don't want to work in certain environments for very valid reasons. And I think that's where the recruitment process cannot just stop at recruitment. It has to go through personnel management. It has to go through retention efforts. It has to go all the way to even the end, Rowan. You talk about looking at exit interviews and being able to understand why these people are leaving your organization, and someone that has an eye for detail from the very beginning, and how we kind of, for lack of better words, but catch the nurse out in the environment, that wherever they are, whether that's recruiting directly from school or it's recruiting from, the community, all the way out to the end of their journey. And understanding that, I think, is a key portion of what AudienceLink does differently than any other type of recruitment agency.
Yeah, I think, and there's so many different layers to it. So when I was a head of resourcing of a big mental health and learning disability company in the UK, 10,000 staff, lots of different sites across the portfolio, so hospitals and care homes, etc. And there was no singular proposition, come and join our company, because it wasn't easy to say that. So a lot of work went into, researching every job family to try and understand what that proposition could be, to make sure it's real and that we could bring it to life. And the difficulty that I had, having never done a job like that before, but I'd worked a lot in kind of employer branding and recruitment marketing, was that every site that I visited, just like you said then, Mel, had their own proposition. So each site could have had their own EVP. They need their own EVP, because a lot of the target audience is local, and people, see the care home or the hospital up on the hill. And, what is the reputation of that care home? Is it one of them that people hold their breath as they walk past or tell stories about? Or is it somewhere that people go, I wish I could get a job there, but I don't know how, maybe it's not for me. And it takes a lot of thinking and a lot of research. And I think that where, one of the biggest mistakes that companies make is where they assume they know the answers, because they go out with messages that they want to be true, but they've missed the biggest point, and they've not asked the people, the people that they've joined, the people that stay, the people that love it. And like you said, people have left. Why have they left? Were they promised something that they didn't get?
And not to put you, Johnny, on the spot here, but What would you say to an employer that, I, as a travel nurse, for example, let me give you some context. I went to these small community hospitals for many years. And a lot of times I would hear staff say, oh yeah, this is the hospital that everybody dies at. And then the next one I would go to would be the hospital that everybody dies at. I'm like, how do you, I guess as an employer and someone that's maybe in a C-suite, and maybe this is a good tie into Dean, how you guys used to work together in one of those large organizations. How do you help the turn the tide of that conversation? Like, what are some things that, I guess, where does it start, I guess, to be able to change that conversation around your organization? Because clearly it's not where everyone dies. It's just people have that one story that they heard, or their grandmother that was ill and ended up, it was just their time. How do you kind of navigate around that from your?
So from my point of view, I think it's really important to see somebody's brand separately to their brand as an employer. So most organizations have got vision, they've got values, they've got mission, but quite often the thing that is overlooked to quite a big degree is the EVP, so the employee value proposition, which is basically the people deal. So somebody looking at your company and thinking, what's in it for me? What does it feel like to work there? So, I think there's a lot of organizations where they get this right, that their employer brand is much stronger, much more friendly, much more warm, much more well-known than the corporate brand. And I think that, they are different. And there's a lot of companies out there who rely on their marketing teams to communicate their employer brand. And, a marketing specialist, communication specialist is different to a recruitment marketing or recruitment communication specialist. They are two different things. I would not even start to go and try and sell products. I'm sure that the methodology is very similar, but products and leads are different to jobs and people. And I think this is one of the biggest things, is that people, organizations see people or candidates or hires as numbers, and they never look past that. which is a huge mistake, especially in healthcare.
So just for absolute certainty and clarity, Rowan, you're saying that that's not the case.
Say again.
So you're saying that that's not the case, that you can't just lose a consultant surgeon and just plug in another surgeon like for like and never have to think about it again. You're saying that there's something, because there'll be people listening to this, I think, in the corporate world, that might be the first time they've heard that. That it's not just
that products and services. Products and services are different than people and humans.
I'm being tongue in cheek here and purposely provocative, but there will, and you know, and I can say this with a fair degree of certainty, admittedly not for many of my clients, there will be healthcare executives in the UK today that truly still believe that. I bet most of them are chief finance officers. I bet they really struggle. A lot of them, not all, but I think a lot of them today will really struggle when they look at a list of job vacancies and the cost associated with it and agency spend, that they really struggle to understand why it isn't just a numbers situation and that you can't just plug it in. So I was being purposefully provocative there, but I think it's a really good area to belabor the point.
And I don't think it is just the bean counters. I think that you would be surprised that actually, you know, there's a lot of hospital managers or directors or home care who've come through the ranks. So they've come through as nurses or come through as support workers. They've got the promotions. They end up in their job, and it's a commercial job, a lot of it, and there's a lot of pressure, and a lot of it is driven by finances. And you know, your head count, your staffing matrix, if that has been designed for you, it does become numbers. That's what you're talking about, is numbers. And I think that it is wrong. You can't have a ward and lose 2 nurses or 4 nurses and then just replace them with 4 qualified nurses. They've got to be the right people. It's the same as in any organisation. I would imagine, if you're going to get it right, is that you need to bring the right kind of people in, and that is key, because it's difficult to recruit, but it's very difficult to replace the right people. And it costs more to lose a good nurse who's been with you for 5 years, 10 years, with all that knowledge and all that good practice and knowledge of systems and processes and the company culture. It costs so much more than recruiting probably 10 nurses.
And that's that portion where you look at the retention of personnel, right? Like, you know, while being an expert at, you know, helping an organization to define their EVP and separate it from their branding, you know, you might have some great people working in marketing that are really great at selling the whole brand, really great at selling the services inside the hospital. But once, you know, you work with them to kind of delineate between the brand and the employer brand of what the employee is going to get from the organization. Then once you attract that talent, that's the key part of AudienceLink that I love, is that you have programs that are set up to help retain the staff and to help foster the culture that they want in that EVP, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And they do go hand in hand. So I think the main drivers of unwanted turnover, so people leaving, especially leaving quickly, is it's not just recruiting the wrong people. So quite often as a head of resource or head of recruitment or head of talent, you get blamed, or people try to blame you for unwanted early turnover. So where did you get those staff from? And you're like, well, you hired them, you offered them the job, you know, we provided them and you've offered them a job. Whereas I heard the story the other day, actually, this is quite on point, is that there is a home care agency, right, who they need a manager and they need 4 or 5 nurses. And the owner, I assume it's the owner, knows exactly what he wants, exactly the candidate that they need, the candidates that they need to fill those gaps and to do well. But they really struggle to recruit, and they struggle even more to retain these people. So the people are coming in and then they're leaving. And it's a scratch the head moment. Why? We're doing everything right. We know exactly who it is. We're paying more than our competitors. But they're missing the key element there, is that you're going out getting the wrong people in and giving the wrong people deal. So if you were to recruit a nurse who is after career development and you promise them, you come and join our company, we'll give you career development, we'll support you all the way and make sure that you progress, and then they come in and that's not there, then they'll leave. Because, you know, with the climate that we're in, if I was a nurse, I mean, honestly, if I was a registered nurse now and I walked out onto my drive in the middle of the road and said, I need a job, I'm a registered nurse, somebody would probably hire me like right now. It wouldn't take long. It's very competitive. And,
That's
you know,
very true.
It is
I think,
to your point, Rowan, on that. So today I got a text message completely out of the blue from who knows where. And they were like, look, there's a new mental health hospital opening, register manager, hospital director, 100K. Are you interested? I'm like, no. But that's not the point. I'm not even looking. I haven't worked for another organization other than myself in coming on for 3 years. I'm not on any job sites. I'm not open to work or anything like that. But even still, such high demand that out of the blue you'll get this text in. So I think you are right. I think if you came
yeah.
out of your door,
So
you
I
would be
once,
offered a job.
just as a test, and this is going back a bit as well, but it's even worse now. So I once used my mum's name and did a fake CV as a registered nurse, and I put it on to a CV database of a well-known job board with my phone number just to see what had happened. And honestly, I think it was within the first evening, I had 65
Yep.
contacts, and
And
those
I
that
think
came.
that's one of the problems as a nurse, like on the receiving end. I was a traveler for many years, so I get text messages all day long. And that's one of the things for me as someone that might be searching for a job, right? How do I look at an employer and see that that's different than someone else, that it's different than the traditional job role? It's different. And I think that's where bringing somebody like AudienceLink into the picture is really beneficial for an organization, because you can see that there's something different about the way that they approach not only the candidate outreach, but their job postings, just the way that they go about the traditional route. Because I think a lot of organizations use things like Indeed, and softwares like that. Is that correct, Rowan?
Yeah, it is, and I suppose there's two big issues. One is that most job board platforms allow somebody to apply for a job like that, and they will apply, and believe it or not, some organisations, when they contact these candidates who've applied for many jobs and say, "Oh, you've applied for a job at our company," and they go, "Have I? What? I don't know. Have I?" And how would they know? They've just applied for 20 jobs in 10 minutes. And believe it or not, some of these companies go, "Oh, well, they clearly don't want a job at my place then. So no, they're not the candidate for us," or they've not filled in the 3-page form that we require for someone to make an application. And it's like, well, it's 2024. You got to think of the candidate behavior. It's about speed. It's about making it really simple and understanding what do they want out of their job. So if they want 5 things from their job, what can we actually promise our company? Can we offer promise career development? No. Well, let's not say it then. Can we offer a really supportive environment? Yes. Right. We'll keep that one. Can we promise access to the MD team and to be empowered and make decisions? Yep. Great. Well, we'll keep that one. So on and so forth. There's not much thought that goes into that. It's job advert, click, 1,000 applications, just push them through, hope one sticks.
Just you saying that, Rowan, I can't see if I was looking, and I've looked at thousands of job postings, and something like where we have a great communication with our physicians, and you can, message our physicians 24 hours a day, 7 days a week and get a response. Like, I would work there. Like,
Yeah.
I would apply to that as opposed to somewhere else, because I know that the struggle, and like that's the difference between someone letting inexperienced marketing do your initial recruitment and hiring setup, as opposed to somebody like you, Rowan, who really understands what it takes to be an excellent caregiver. And I think everything in your life has led you up to being able to understand what a true great nurse looks like and a true great caregiver looks like.
Yeah.
And I think that that's part of the reason why, you're starting the foundation that you're doing and all of the other things that you're doing in collaboration with AudienceLink, because you do really know what it feels like to be on the receiving end of care.
I absolutely do. And I know exactly where you're going with this. And so whilst I'm talking about, volume of applications and ease of application and clicks and all this kind of stuff, the best candidates They're not on job boards looking for jobs. They've not got their CV on a job board. They don't need to. They might be in a company. They might have been there for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Who knows? And they might have a string of bad days. And it's on those bad days where you need your brand to be in the back of their minds to think, actually, I've seen their communication 7 times. I'm going to have a look, and then you will win. So in terms of the AudienceLink Foundation, I've spent, the whole of this year in hospital by the side of my 12-year-old son who was diagnosed with AML leukemia on the 2nd of January. He has been cured, which I'm delighted to say.
We're
But
so happy.
it's amazing, absolutely amazing. But in that time, I've studied the nurses. I've asked every single one whether they're newly qualified bank nurses or I'll give you one example. A lady I will never forget. She's, I don't know how old she is. She's definitely coming to the end of her career. She's paid off her mortgage. She talks about where she's going to retire to, the downsizing of her house. She doesn't need to work. She just loves it. She loves the patient outcome. She loves saving people's lives. And she doesn't want to be a ward manager. She doesn't want to be a leader. She just wants to come in and do her job. And she sees it just as a job. But she's the one lady who, when we first got the diagnosis and my head was all over the place, I spent all night Googling what it means and absolutely scaring myself to death. And as soon as she saw me, she could tell by looking at me, I know that you're in this state. Come and sit down next to me. Sat me down and said, right, I'm going to tell you exactly how it is. And she was really candid, but she changed everything just in that one conversation. And she didn't have to do that. And, some nurses will learn from her and be like her. And, she will be mentored. But those kind of nurses, they're not on job boards looking for jobs. They're not
No,
applying.
they're not.
No, and you're not going to nick them by sending them an email. What's important to her. So if she's in an environment that is purpose-built, that is, she's allowed to spread her knowledge and give that kind of mentorship and to give that value to someone like me. And she would have gone home. I'd like to think she'd gone home that day after I was hugging her and sobbing on her shoulder going, I've just made such a difference to this guy. I've never met him before. Probably the worst time of his life. And I've just made that.
Think about how many people she's probably done that for. Thousands of them. And I know that type of approach, I learned that from seasoned nurses. The nurse that trained me when I went to the ICU, she had been a nurse for 30 some years before that. And I learned so much from her. And that type of leadership that she showed just in being a great nurse is something that we don't have at the bedside anymore because all of those nurses have left. And I think that now employers are starting to wake up, certainly in the United States, and certainly as care moves into the home, that there are lots of nurses that do want to take the time to come back into the arena. They want to step back and they want to make a good difference but we have to learn how to attract them and show them that there's a space for them to do that great stuff like that nurse did for you and your son.
That's exactly it. And, it's not rocket science, but there is methodologies to getting your message, the right message in front of these people who are not on job boards, they're not searching for jobs. They might be doing something else and they will be hanging out online somewhere. And it's like, okay, so where are they hanging out? And at what times are they hanging out? And what is it that motivates them? What can we promise them that's true? And how can we match that motivating factor to something that's true in our company? And how do we bring it to life in a format on the right platform that they go, oh, that's interesting. And instead of going, oh, they clicked, right, phone them, do you want a job? It's like, okay, they click now. Nurturing journey where we there are techniques out there that have come from the world of marketing, but it's a softer approach. And the other, massive faux pas that organizations make is that when they've got a candidate, so let's just say you got that bit right, and you've got a candidate who's entered the application system and gone, okay, I'm interested in a job, there is a period of time that takes quite a while to get that person through all the checks that need to happen to the point that they start in their job. And they live in my world, in recruitment world, they live in the pipeline. Okay, so they become a number and they live in the pipeline and they're left in the pipeline. And guess what? Quite often they fall out of the pipeline.
Yeah.
Why is that? And that could be 30%, could be 50, even more percentage of these people who you searched so hard to find. I've described it a few times like having a fine piece of crystal. So you've done all this work in recruitment and the application's this fine piece of crystal. and you've got it. And then what you do is you hand it over to the person who is processing the application and going to, you know, do that initial phone sift and book them in for an interview. And if they get it and they're going, hey, you know, I've got this bit of crystal, right? I'll send them an email, send them another or a text. Great. You know, that piece of crystal is probably still intact, but it might not land it in that interview slot. Then you're handing it over again, probably to somebody who does the interview. And, you know, if they're on the interview and they're doing it on their phone and they're eating or they've not thought about the environment or what they're going to say, they may as well be getting the crystal and kind of throwing it about like this. And even if they get through and that crystal's still intact, they then pass it on to the next person who's going to deal with that on board him. So if you just leave the piece of crystal, a beautiful piece of crystal, on the side and it's just gathering dust and it's getting, you know, it's in a pile of junk, and you might end up just losing it. And it happens all the time. But it doesn't even stop there, because once they've started, you're handing it over again to a busy hiring manager who needs to hold this crystal, wrap it like a baby and hold it for 6 months until you can go, there you go, now be free. And but it just doesn't happen. It's like quite often.
And in
it's
the
like,
US, Rowan, you know, the hiring manager will meet with you during the interview process. So they're trying to hire you, interview you, vet you, do all your share days, whatever. The whole time they're trying to run an entire unit. And sometimes they're even staffing at that point. So they don't have the time and attention needed to develop these skill sets and to develop the processes. And I think that's where something like AudienceLink is really beneficial, because you can come in and see where they're at and what resources they do have. It doesn't matter how big the company is or how small the company is. And then you guys tailor those key items to meet those opportunities that organization actually does have. If they don't have a recruitment team and they don't have the tools that they need, there's something to be said for your ability as a company. And you've got some excellent people on your team that just do amazing things. You know,
sorry, Mel, just
go
thought
ahead.
this is probably a really good point. So Rowan didn't name but obviously Rowan and I work together in this, you know, large provider that he mentioned beforehand. And obviously you left the corporate world behind, Rowan, and you entered the world of entrepreneurship and you set up AudienceLink. Why?
I was working in healthcare, volume recruiter. So, you know, recruiting thousands of vacancies and really hard to fill vacancies as well. In COVID, after COVID, well, so it's a bit of a long story, but I'll try and shorten it. So what you've just been talking about, Mel, is, so I got 16 hours a week back that I was spent driving around going to see people like Dean and trying to put out fires, basically. Not at your place, Dean, obviously.
Thank you.
So I got 16 hours back, and what I did is I mapped out our entire process. So from the point that a hiring manager says, I need to recruit a nurse, and really looked into that part. So do they just need to recruit like for like? Do they check if they need like for like? What do they check? And what happens through every key stage? So, okay, now I'm going to speak to the recruitment team who are going to put out an advert, or they're going to source for this candidate. So what does that briefing process look like? What does the advert look like? What does the application, yada, yada, all the way through? So candidate touch points. That's what you were describing, Mel. And I've looked at every single candidate and thought, what do we communicate at this point? Why do we communicate? What do we want the candidate to do or feel like? Why do we send them this, or why don't we send them that? And we ended up changing the entire process, because when you're doing this job day to day, it's really difficult to, you know, take a helicopter view, take some time and have a look and go, right, how can we improve it? There's ways you can do it. You can do it a bit at a time. I had the luxury, thanks to COVID, to do the whole thing. So getting to your point, Dean, after COVID, everybody needed a job. So we'd gone through that period, and suddenly it was like, there's nothing I could touch that wasn't amazing, because we're just getting candidates from everywhere. And I was like, this isn't me. This is the market. We've got to be careful. We've got to make sure that we are still going to be sustainable when the market changes, which it did almost overnight. Suddenly there were more jobs than there were candidates. And at that point, my strategy was very much job board heavy. The job boards put their prices up, not all of them, but a lot of them did. And the basic message was you need to spend more money if you want to find more candidates. But it wasn't true, because there weren't more candidates. yeah, you could spend more money, but everybody was after that same talent pool, and there was false promises, and it was like I felt like they were, yes, we've got them, they're desperate, they've got block beds. I heard stories from my friends in the media saying we've got companies phoning us and asking to pay extra money to appear number one on the page just because the board, like the executive team, want to see it at number one. And I'd say, so what do you tell them? They go, oh, we sell them extra products, and we're having a great time. I thought, this is wrong. This is healthcare. We're all going to end up in a system. We've probably all got family or people that are in the healthcare system at some point right now. How can we just let this happen? So I went on a personal mission to find different ways of attracting meaningful candidates. So forget thousands of applications. Where are the good ones? And I tried lots of different things. Some of them worked, some of them failed. And I ended up reducing our job ad spend massively and turning off most of our usual methods and finding new methods, trialing them, partnering with companies. And, the results were we recruited 6,000 people. We didn't use a single job board ad. We didn't use any agency, paid for search agency.
Wow.
It was an amazing story. And for other reasons, after 5.5 years in the job, Dean, I decided I'm going to come out of this and I'm going to help other people like me who have to navigate through quite a difficult and challenging environment of being a scapegoat for staffing problems when you're only dealing with recruitment. It's not the whole of staffing. And also because I had the secret, I knew how to fix it. So the first year, when I decided to take the leap of faith, my first year was just incredible because those methods that I was using, they worked for everyone.
Yeah.
And
I've been, we've been friends outside of work anyway, but I've been a fan of your journey with AudienceLink on LinkedIn, and it's gone well. I don't think there's any other objective way to describe it. So, I'm misquoting here, but I think there's been award nominations, events, things like that with results you're getting with other clients.
Yeah, so you're right. We're up for 4 awards in the next couple of months, which is really exciting. And we've got our clients. Our top 3 clients I'm thinking of off the top of my head, they've all got record low vacancies, record low temporary agency usage, record low nurse vacancies. The turnover is improved. It's not all just down to AudienceLink. It's a sign of the market as well. It's a sign of the times. But what we've managed to do is reduce spend on the usual methods and invest in employer brand-led activity, which not only is driving incredible results, that if you combine all the years that I've been working on this, particularly in terms of social media and Google and employer brand, this methodology that I'm talking about, you're probably talking 8 years. It's taken a long time to get it right. I got a WhatsApp the other day from somebody in my team that said, I've just had the first campaign results for our client, recruiting nurses. It's been live for, I think, 12 weeks. So first week was a pure learning period, very niche part of nursing. And they'd had 22 shortlisted applications, 14 interviews, and they'd already made 5 hires. And
wow, Rowan.
The total cost in terms of media spend was less than £2,000. So if you were to make 5 hires from an agency, search agency, you're talking a lot more than that, probably pushing £4,000, something like that. So
wow, that's so cool. I'm so excited. Cool. This is what I love about being able to have this podcast and this platform, because to me it's like people need to know that there's innovative solutions out there for some of the most complex problems in healthcare, and that's all that we're about. So Rowan, talk briefly a little bit about Rowan is actually, everyone that's listening is going to the health conference in Vegas. We're very excited.
Honestly, Lord help us. Lord help. Vegas.
He is going to support Jen Johnson, who is part of the Nurse Approved program, and she has some excellent burnout and stress reduction tools for nurses to maintain and retain them. And Rowan has, graciously offered to help support her and the organizations that choose to use their program for burnout. in this great new program that he's invented called Love Work. And I'm so excited because ultimately nurses do love their jobs. You know, nursing school is super hard. And people that are in care that aren't nurses do it because they genuinely love taking care of people. And I think that if we can start to highlight the ability to love your job again, that's really just going to change the climate. And I'm so excited to be just kind of blowing the whistle for you guys and letting the world know. So talk a little bit about health and about Love Work and your partnerships that you're developing here to help the US market.
Okay, so since AudienceLink was born, I've been told on a number of occasions that what we do and the way that we do it would go down really well in the US. So I've had this kind of pipe dream of rowing across the Atlantic and going, right, okay, and taking our methodologies, and it's
Rowing,
not,
literally rowing across
yeah.
the, I got
That's
it.
not
I got it.
Making America
with the
British
guitar
again.
and
I
singing
love
my
it.
song, but
If you could run it, you would. We know that. If you could run it,
that's true.
everyone, Rowan's an excellent runner. He loves to run.
no, thank you. So I mean, I know that we do things that aren't done generally in the US in terms of talent attraction, and our approach is thoughtful and it's creative, and what we try and do is make it real, as I explained before. So I think that would be quite a refreshing approach. The other key thing for me is that if you can retain your staff, you've got less need for recruitment and less need to spend on recruitment. And what Jen is doing, and the work that you're all doing actually in forming these communities in nursing, is amazing. So one of the, again, a massive part of our research into why nurses join and why they stay and why they leave, quite often there is nowhere to turn to speak to peers and to get support from your own kind of your own networks. They don't really exist everywhere. I know where we worked, Dean, that there was one introduced in the north, which was just amazing. We did a podcast about it. It was brand new, and you have people from different service lines able to help each other and talk about how they feel and the challenges that they've got, and learn about revalidating their pain and what events to go to and which ones to avoid, all that kind of stuff that is just it's not put on a plate, it's not out there. So with the Love Work program, it's an experiential learning journey is probably the best way to describe it. And the aim is to address key reasons for unwanted turnover, one of which is managers. We all know that. So if you've got a manager that doesn't have the time for you or the skills or doesn't give you that support or the care, then you are inclined to move on. Again, it's very competitive, so you can move on. So part of our program is around managers, and it dovetails beautifully with what Jen's doing, because it's, how do you spot those early signs of burnout? But also, how do you approach it? How do you deal with it? How do you talk with empathy, which is, nurse managers, they've all got this, but they're in a busy environment. So what we've developed is a framework for people to follow and to reference when they're having these conversations. It doesn't just stop there. It also works with the nurses themselves. And it doesn't have to be nurses, but this is specifically aimed at nurses, where their first level of retention, I suppose, is the peer-to-peer support. So it's understanding how to coach each other, how to get support from each other. And again, using the framework that they can reference to say, this is how I'm feeling, or this is how I'm feeling. Can I get some time with you to talk about how I'm feeling and to work through this together? So even if the manager doesn't get it, which we hope they will, you've still got that first line of defense, if you like, the peer-to-peer. And then the third element of it is around well-being. And the aim is, it's not kind of your standard well-being fitness kind of collection. It's things that we believe actually you could do with your service users potentially. And it's just reminding people to take a little bit of time for themselves, because it's a really challenging job and it's not for everybody. And to think that we put nurses in an environment where they do get burnt out is wrong, because they will exit the sector, and to bring them back in is going to be 10 times harder. And the whole point here is that all of us are trying to address the healthcare staffing crisis. And unless you get the turnover retention part right, there's only so much you can do at the front end in terms of recruitment. So really, it's kind of the final piece of our puzzle which is, we focus on talent attraction, getting the right people first time of asking with the right messages, the right platforms at the right times. And then the candidate experience is holding their hand and holding that fine piece of crystal all the way through, keeping them engaged so they actually start. But when they start, is actually putting a methodology in place for them to be supported so that they can give the best care possible. And if we can achieve that, then I will die happy.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that we don't bring that about prematurely. I think listen, I promised you, Rowan, that I'd get you out of here by 4 o'clock. Time is, I think we could go very long on this, but so let's talk about a few things and we'll wrap you up. So anyone wants to contact you, you're going to be at the health conference in Las Vegas is that next week?
19th to the 23rd.
19th. Yep. So you'll be there. So people should get in touch with Rowan beforehand, preferably via LinkedIn. Is that the best platform to get hold of you, Rowan? Then, so we've got Love Work as part of AudienceLink. Have you got any other areas or outlets that people can, learn about recruitment and things like that? Yeah.
So again, we've done so much research into. It's not just nurses. So we're talking the entry level jobs as well. Why people come into healthcare, what motivates them to stay, and all of these different reasons. Quite often you will get companies like ours that, when they work with a client, they reinvent the wheel every time and they charge a fortune for it because they can. That's not what we do. So I'm literally coming with an open book. I'm happy to share. Mel, you're on mute. I can tell that you keep trying to chip in, but you're on mute, just so you know. But so basically I'm coming to share our knowledge, to learn about, what goes on in the US, to learn more, to support Jen. Really, well, I mean, everything we do is about great, inspiring change. So it's simple as that. So I can't wait. I absolutely can't wait. I've been in a hospital for 9 months. So
Vegas is probably the perfect tonic to recover.
Hopefully you don't end up back in the hospital because of your trip to Vegas. But we're so excited for you, Rowan. I really think, it's going to take creative minds and creative people like yourself to really come back into healthcare and help us in the areas where we need to. So in the show notes, we'll be sure to share some information of how you get in touch with Rowan and AudienceLink. And if you're attending health conference and you make sure you go to the Nurse Approved Pavilion, say hi to Rowan and let him know that you heard him on the podcast. And I'm sure he will have some wonderful things to share with you about ways that you can enhance recruitment and retention in your organizations. So Rowan, thank you so much for your time. And we're so excited about Jack's recovery. And also we'll have to do a whole podcast about the foundation, what we're doing on that side and how people can get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should get the remnants of Rowan on the podcast after Vegas, and whatever returns back from your trip, Rowan, we will find a platform to make good use of you here.
Videos where they're like, this is me on day 1 of work, or day 3, this is me on day 1 of the health conference, and we'll do afterwards. So this is Rowan pre-health conference.
And this is us keeping our promise of getting him out of here on time. So thank you, Rowan, for your time. Really excited about everything that's going on at AudienceLink. Mel, as always, thank you for joining us, and we'll speak to everyone soon on the next episode of the Tactical Scrubs podcast.